Welcome to all the MBA hopefuls who are attending the Poets and Quants Center Court today and are here for the MBA Story Spotlight, an insider's guide to standing out in the MBA admissions process. All right, a quick housekeeping thing. I've enabled both the chat and the Q&A, so you can use either. And I am going to monitor both, but I'm going to save most of the questions for the end. So I want you to save them. I'll monitor them, but I'm not going to answer all of them unless they're absolutely pertinent to what we're talking about in the presentation itself. And I want to make sure that you're all with me and you're paying attention because I'm going to start asking you questions. And the very first question is, I want you to go in the chat and I want you to tell me, where are you joining from today? So I'll give you a moment and go in the chat and please tell me the place that you're joining in from today because I am eager to know. Alexandria, Virginia, not too far from me. I am in Virginia myself today. All right, who else? Don't be shy, friends. Kemi from Lagos, Nigeria. Well, hello there, all the way in Lagos, Nigeria. Who else? Hello from France. Oh, well, hello to you too. Isn't it a little too late tonight? What is it, like 10 p.m.? I guess that's not too late in France. Wonderful. And I actually have even more questions. So you can put, again, you can continue to put the answers in the chat, but get ready for my next question, which is, I want you to raise your hand if, are you listening carefully? I want you to raise your hand if, let's make sure you're paying attention. Here's the question. I want you to raise your hand if you're ready to level up your MBA application game and you are over fluffy strategies that don't give you actionable insight and you're ready for tangible advice that actually helps you stand out in the MBA application game. So, oh, beautiful. I didn't even finish asking the question before a person raised their hand. Excellent, excellent, excellent. I love seeing this kind of response because we're going to cover some really important ground today. You will see examples of good MBA stories and of not so good MBA stories. And at the end, we'll jump into action and cover some very specific ways in which you can start uncovering and creating your own MBA story. I will give you the tools you can use literally today to start making progress in your MBA application. Wonderful. Let's make our time together count though. So please turn off that cell phone, shut down all the windows on your computer. Don't multitask on me. Stay with me. Close your door. Be present. So together we can create the first steps towards you standing out in your MBA admissions journey. All right, let's jump straight into action. I want to show you something because I know that you MBA candidates love seeing examples of what other candidates do. So we will start with one such example. This is an excerpt from a Stanford MBA essay. Let's read it together. I grew up having a very idealistic view of what I want to do in life. I want to have a substantial positive impact on the world. Now, I want you to think, does this paragraph grab your attention? Go in the chat and tell me yes or no. Do you think that this is something that can help this candidate stand out? Go and open the chat. And nope, someone is saying no. Great. But here's the thing. Stanford cares tremendously about impact. So why do you feel that this candidate didn't hit the mark? Tell me, what do you think happened? Those of you who are saying very general, too vague, you guys are absolutely correct. If you said no, that's the right answer. Here's the problem with the approach that I just showed you. If you make a statement about yourself, it's very rarely convincing. Or as Margaret Thatcher, British Prime Minister in the past, someone who was very masterfully portrayed by Gillian Anderson in the show The Crown, because I know that all of you are probably way too young to remember Margaret Thatcher, as she very pointedly said, being powerful is like being a lady. If you have to tell people you are, You aren't. And that exactly is the problem with statements. They're flat, they're boring. And the worst part actually is that a statement can be true and it can talk about an important aspect of your candidacy. That at the heart of that statement, there may be a quality that actually makes you a great candidate, but the problem is in the way you're expressing it. Simply saying, I want to have positive impact is something that can be written by literally thousands of other candidates. This is why statements miss the mark. They're forgettable because they're indistinguishable from one another. And really, the last thing you want when your admission file is being reviewed is to be forgettable. But how do you get out of the statements trap? How do you answer the question about what matters most to you or any of the other essay questions without being forgettable? After all, that essay answered the question, right? What the MBA outcome wants to see is how your idealistic worldview was formed, what it actually means. How do you plan on having that impact? What have you done already? Schools are notoriously famous for using your past behaviors as a predictor of your future ones. So, in other words, the MBA outcome wants to hear your story. They want to know what happened. They want to know how it happened. They want to know what it is that you did to make it happen. And they want to know why you did what you did. So, what does this all mean? They want specifics, they want details. But let's level set here for a moment. I know that even after me saying all of this, you might still feel like you are not really sure what the story about yourself is that you're going to tell to the AdCom. Or you might feel afraid that your story, your application are not going to stand out. Or even worse, you might feel like you will miss the mark and you're not going to get into your dream school. But whatever your fear is, you're in the right place today. I can pull the curtain and teach you how to embark on creating your MBA story with curiosity and confidence instead of fear and anxiety. But before I do, you may be asking yourself, wait a second, who is Petia Whitmore to be teaching me all this? She hasn't even introduced herself. Where do her insights come from? You have all the right to ask, so let me introduce myself. I've been part of MBA admissions for the last 15 years. I spent 8 years at the Graduate School of Business at Babson College, which happens to be my alma mater, and most of them were spent directing the MBA admissions efforts. So I was the person deciding what MBA stories matter, presiding over the MBA AdCom, and being the ultimate decision maker on MBA applications. From there, I moved to the Education Advisory Board, which is a portfolio company of Vista Equity Partners. And if you don't know Vista, you've probably heard of its founder, Robert Smith, a Columbia Business School alum. You've probably heard the story how in 2019, in the middle of his commencement speech to the Morehouse College class of 2019, he paused and famously committed to eliminating the student loan debt of all the graduates and their families. He paid something like $34 million to cover, as promised, the student loans and the loans of their parents. And then immediately before I launched my MBA path, I spent 2 years as the chief executive of the MBA Tour, a subsidiary of the Graduate Management Admission Council. Yes, the same organization that created and administers the GMAT exam. And as the leader of the MBA Tour, I worked personally with every single top school as part of helping them create and execute their MBA recruitment strategy, the same strategy that connects them to you. So my knowledge and insights are built on a foundation of having played a significant role in shaping graduate management education for more than a decade. And if you Google me and you go to the news tab, you'll see that I'm frequently quoted by the Wall Street Journal and Forbes and US News and World Report. Recently, open letter to MBA recommenders that got published, authored by me and published on Poets and Quants, went viral. I was giving a piece of my mind to recommenders who were making it difficult for you, MBA candidates, to actually get great letters of recommendation. You can look it up. I've also served on the board of directors of AGAC, our professional association of consultants, but that's not the most important part. The most important part is that I'm an MBA admissions enthusiast, And I am committed as the founder of my MBA path to help create more MBA success stories. And this is what we will do today. I'm here with you in order to help you feel more confident in how you'll build your own MBA story that will pave the way for you being admitted to your dream MBA program. So let's get back to our topic for today, and let's focus on how to avoid falling prey to boring statements about yourselves, even if they're true, because it doesn't have to happen to you. You don't have to be the person who gets moved to the pile of candidates who fail to differentiate themselves. Instead, I want you to imagine having the MBA AdCom read your file and say, we need to meet this person, and moving your application to the interview invite pile. This is where we're going to go today, and here's how we will do it. First, we're going to talk about the difference between evaluation and selection in the MBA application process. It's a fundamental difference that it's important for you to know. From there, we're going to talk about why the MBA story is really so critical. We'll also talk about a common misconception that keeps so many MBA candidates up at night. It's the misconception that somehow you have to have prior business experience, or you have to have managed teams of people and budgets, that you have to have some major inventions to your name to even stand out at the very top schools. You will see that you don't have to be extraordinary in order to be unique, and what to do instead. And finally, we're going to talk about how to find the gold nuggets for your MBA story and take some very specific action about that. So let's begin, and let's level set here for a moment, because I have another question for you, and I want you to open your chat. So if I told you that approximately 75 to 80% of all Wharton MBA applications and applicants are qualified for admission, is this true or not? Go in the chat and tell me. True? Okay. Really? True? Okay. What does everyone else think? Potentially true? Maybe? Someone is saying, no, it's too high. Here's the thing. This is actually a fact that came straight from the Wharton MBA admissions FAQs. They tell you we typically receive 6,000 to 7,000 applications in a given year, and approximately 75 to 80% of all applicants are qualified for admission. This is literally, you can Google it and you can find it right on the Wharton website. But if this happens to be true, then how does this process really work? What happens that so many of these people end up not being admitted? Only less than 1 in 5 end up being invited. I mean, you might say, well, obviously there is a capacity constraint, but it's more than that. If so many qualify but don't get admitted, then how the heck does the process really work? Within the huge number of MBA applications who qualify, you need to be someone that they actually want to invite to the class. Evaluation determines who is admissible. Selection determines who is desirable. And this is exactly why the MBA story is so important. I want you to pause here for a moment and really take this in. The notion of evaluation versus selection is the fundamental principle of MBA admissions and a magic formula of MBA admission to the most selective MBA programs. If you understand this concept, and if you approach your MBA application with it in mind, you will already be ahead of the competition. Now, what does it mean when we say that the MBA story is so critical? First of all, stories have a unique way of engaging and connecting people. Stories evoke emotions and engage the audience. In your case, that audience is the MBA AdCom reviewers and evaluators, and it engages them on a deeper level. MBA admission is a human business. The MBA admissions process is a human-to-human connection. If you tell the MBA AdCom a story, you will allow them to relate to your experiences, your struggles, and your triumphs. When emotions are involved, people are more likely to remember and internalize the message being conveyed. Stories paint a memorable picture. You've heard the expression, a picture is worth 1,000 words, but here's the thing. There isn't a lot of room for pictures in the MBA admissions process, except for maybe NYU Stern and their Big Six essay. But the parts of your MBA application do paint a picture of you, of your lived experiences. In that evaluation versus selection process, to select you, they have to see you. And the best way for that to happen is if you tell them a story. Because as species, we're addicted to story. Jonathan Gottschall is a scholar of literature and evolution, and he famously said this quote here. And it's very timely and it's very appropriate that he's a historian, because what is history if not a collection of stories? And if you pause and think about it, even the famous Harvard Business School case method is nothing but a story. Each case is a story about people in business, what they faced, what they did, how they did it, and how it turned out. So think about this for a second. If HBS believes that describing a situation with a protagonist, a cast, and twists and turns is the best way to teach the most distinguished business leaders of the world, do you need any more convincing that your MBA story is the key to you standing out in the MBA admissions race? But what goes into an MBA story? What should be the plot? Where do you even begin? Consider this description straight from the Stanford Graduate School of Business evaluation criteria. What they tell you is we base our evaluation on your whole application, and we take into account factors such as your background, experiences, perspectives, aspirations, values, and accomplishments. And what are all these things? What are your background, experiences, perspectives, aspirations, values, and accomplishments, if not your story? The story of who you are, how you became the person you are today, the one seeking admission to the school. Now, let me show you another example of a very different essay opening that answers the question, what makes you feel alive and why? That's the famous Berkeley Haas essay question. What makes you feel alive when you're doing it and why? So let's read it together. I dance around a little as the vibrant scent of cumin permeates the air. Beyond following my rebellious streak, defying the culinary norms I grew up with, allow me to express myself in inventive, edible forms. You can immediately imagine this scene, right? You can immediately see this person dancing in her kitchen, sprinkling spices on food. And you want to keep reading because you want to know, why on earth is this something that makes this person feel most alive? And remember, this is the difference between a statement and a story. Stories make it real. Stories make it relatable. A statement makes you be forgettable. And then in the second example, you're seeing someone where you can pivot to being this person and make sure to be the candidate who gets remembered and selected. Now, let's talk about one of the most challenging parts of the MBA aspirant's mindset. And this is the notion of needing to be extraordinary. There is a reason I just showed you the cooking example. Is there anything extraordinary about cooking? No. So many of us do it every day. I mean, more or less successfully, but that's another story, right? So here's what I want you to remember as you work your way through your MBA application. You may think that your story is nothing special, not something others would care about, not original. All of this is not true. You don't need a story of heroic achievement. You don't need a story of having saved the person from a burning building in order to be unique. In fact, I can tell you that those heroic stories, the stories of drama and trauma that don't have a point to make and are not connected to the essay topic, are one of the worst mistakes that MBA candidates make. A simple but authentic and meaningful story can be extremely successful. I remember speaking with a colleague from one of the M7 schools and him saying, you'll be surprised how some of the things that you candidates do on an everyday basis can be some of the most fascinating things to us. Things such as how you operate on a team, how you interact with the people around you. So keep this in mind as you're working on your essays. I want to take a look with you at one more example. A couple of years ago, I worked with a fantastic candidate who ended up being a quadruple admit. He was offered admission to Kellogg, Yale, Berkeley House, as a matter of fact. And this short excerpt above is from one of his key essays. So he's talking about welcoming summer interns to EY and how this is his favorite time of the year every year. And then how this summer was different because he volunteered to lead a small team of interns as an ambassador. Now, does being an internship program ambassador strike you as something completely extraordinary? No, but it didn't have to be to capture the attention of the MBA AdCom. As simple as this accomplishment was, spanning just one summer, by telling the story about the summer journey of these 6 interns, he was deemed worthy of demonstrating the leadership and teamwork qualities that schools are looking for. And here, let me tell you a little bit of a behind the scenes secret. When we first started working together, this example was quite flat. So it didn't have the details and nuances. So I had to push the candidate to dig into those. I asked him to mention the interns' names, to describe what a day in the life of guiding them through the project was. These details about how things happen were way more important than the what exactly happened. The what is, I was an internship program ambassador, fairly run of the mill, but the how and how it was relayed made all the difference. So remember where we started. What is important is that the stories are true to your core. It's important that they're relevant, related to both the essay question and to the message you want to send to the MBA AdCom. And of course, it's important that you connect the dots to show how you have the qualities the schools are looking for, but they don't have to be extraordinary. How you will fit into the community at your dream school is way more important, and what contributions you will make is the part that matters, and not some notion of being extraordinary. All right, our time is advancing, so let's keep moving. As you're listening to all this, are any light bulbs going off as you hear these examples? I'll give you a moment to hit the comments. So tell me, as you're listening to this, are you hearing something that's making you think of, oh, I think I might know what my story is going to be? So go in the comments and tell me. Any light bulb moments here? I know that coming up with MBA stories is hard. I know that it's not easy. See, someone is saying, there are a few experiences I have, but which ones should I write about? So let's talk about how to make the process of curating and selecting the gold nuggets for your stories more fruitful. The first thing I'm going to tell you is that randomness is not your friend. One of the worst mistakes that candidates make in the process, especially when it comes to essays where the real storytelling happens, is for searching for random aha moments. Or even worse, they get advice. Some candidates get advice from their friends who successfully got into an MBA with a certain kind of story. And then those candidates think that, oh, this is the story I need to have. And they blindly replicate it. They try to force fit their candidates into some mold that they're told the MBA AdCom is looking for. But what should you do instead? If you're at the beginning of your journey, a really good self-assessment test can do you a ton of good and provide great benefits to you. And it's a very easy place to start because you don't have to start thinking of stories immediately. All you have to do is answer a bunch of questions. But what you get in return is a list of your qualities and the ways in which you interact, which are essentially attributes that you can find stories to illustrate with them. And I definitely have a very strong preference for one. I have no affiliation with them. It's called Principles U. It was created by Ray Dalio, the founder of Bridgewater Associates, and Professor Adam Grant from the Wharton School of Business. It's the latest and greatest. It is free, and it helps you understand deeply how you prefer to think, engage, and apply yourself across the 17 core dimensions of your personality. So this is what the result looks like. This is just one tiny part of the results that you would get. It gives you great insights, and it gives you really great adjectives about yourself that you can choose from, and then you can illustrate them with examples, and collectively with those examples, you can build your story. So that's a really great place to start. Where else do we search for stories? Here's what I can tell you from my experience having worked with and supported so many candidates who have had great success. Every great MBA story starts with asking yourself questions, deep questions, hard questions, sometimes even weird questions, because this is what happens. About 2 months ago, I started working with someone, a really great candidate, and she came to me being kind of skeptical of the value that MBA admissions consultants provide, but she knew all her friends had used one, so she knew she didn't want to be at a disadvantage. And she was skeptical. And then fast forward 2 months, and the day of the Stanford GSB deadline, she sent me an email that read, I submitted to Stanford yesterday, and thank you, thank you, thank you. I feel great about what I submitted, and most importantly, I've actually started to crystallize my thoughts with respect to my vision about my next 10-year goal. I am so appreciative of your exceptional and thoughtful guidance. Now, what did I do? Did I give her some sort of paint by numbers template? No, I asked questions. I listened carefully and I relayed back what I heard. And guess what happened? Today, some of you might know, today was the day when Harvard Business School released their interview invites today at noon. And this person who came to me very skeptical of the process, who ended up really asking herself in engaging in conversations about these big questions that I'm just about to show you, she got invited. So let's take a look at what these questions actually look like, okay? And let me just very quickly take a look. Principles U. Yes, that was the name of the resource. And you're going to see all of this in a email from me afterwards too. And of the questions in case you're going to ask. So let's take a look at the 7 questions. When in life have you been the saddest and the most joyful? There's one HBS MBA admin that famously wrote an essay about the 4 times she cried at work. It was a humble, very human story about woes and joy. You can actually find that essay online and read it. And there's a lesson for you in that person's success story. Who shaped you? Way too often, as candidates start thinking about their brand, their MBA story, they mostly think about themselves. But the people who made you who you are or influenced you may be a very critical part of your MBA application story. How does the story end? A mentor of mine who happened to be an HBS alum and a former Bain partner and twice a CEO once shockingly asked me as I was doing my own soul searching in my career, and he sat there and said, have you thought about writing your own obituary? I'm like, wait, what? But here's the thing, starting with the ending is a legit question that brings out your mission in life, the legacy that you want to leave. What has been the most generous thing you've ever done? The key to this question is to be brutally honest. What was it? Keep it real. Don't answer what you think the AdCom wants to hear. What books have you read more than once? There is a lot to learn about yourself from the readings that inspired or entertained you. What is your biggest regret? This is pretty straightforward. It may never need to make its way into your essay. It's just good to know. It will give you insights into what you're trying to achieve in life and where you may have failed. What is your biggest hope? Whatever your biggest hope is, it probably has a link in some way to why you want to get an MBA. What ends up happening when you use this approach? When you start with big, important questions, you get to the very heart of your essence, not simply as an MBA candidate, but as a person and a professional. So here's how one candidate described that he was someone I worked with in round 2 last year, and he worked with me on Harvard and Wharton, and he got into both. In case you're wondering, he's attending Harvard this fall. And he said, for me, Petia's biggest strength were her ability to listen and to create space for me to freely develop my narrative. She was excellent and facilitating unconstrained brainstorming first, and then helping me sharpen my focus and language. Her unequivocal support for submitting authentic applications without worrying too much about what the MBA admissions committee wants to hear was an invaluable resource. So think about it. There's nothing that the MBA admissions committee wants to hear but the story of you, which is not to say that you shouldn't start with really, really big questions and dig as deep as you can. Do you feel the power of approaching your MBA story with a sense of curiosity and opportunity? And also with a strategic communications mindset? Can you see that? Because if there's one thing I want you to take away from today, it's that the MBA application is an exercise in strategic communications. You need to be intentional in your message design. You need the correct platform, the resume, the essays, the interview. You need to understand your audience, and you need to be very clear about the desired impact and the stories that convey that impact. But sometimes, even with all this guidance, candidates need more. So what happens if you still feel stuck? Even after you hear that advice and you see some examples, what if you still have questions or doubts? I know what you're thinking. Some of you are thinking, what if I'm working on my MBA story and I'm really not sure I have struck gold? Or if I'm uncertain how the MBA outcome will view my story? Do my materials even give me a shot at being selected? The thing is, you don't have to walk your MBA application path alone. My MBA path was created with one goal in mind: to create space for your MBA story to come to life, just like I did for those candidates from the stories that I just shared with you. So especially if you're a round 2 candidate, I have an important message for you. No MBA candidate is self-made. Everyone has mentors, supporters, peers, and some people have more than others. So if you're interested in leveraging every possible resource you could possibly get in the MBA application process, and if you want to have a chief strategist on your side as you work your way towards round 2, let's talk soon, because my roster is nearly full, which means that your competition is already working on creating powerful MBA stories. But when I start talking about this, candidates very often get worried because not everyone can afford to work with an MBA admissions consultant, especially a very highly ranked one-on-one. So here's the best part. Because I know that no one can afford it, and until recently, if you wanted the highest quality MBA admissions expert, you have to have a hefty budget for it, or you had to settle for kind of like do-it-yourself tools. That's not the case anymore. And there's a place now where you can access everything I teach to MBA candidates in my one-on-one practice, and you can work with me directly at a tiny fraction of the cost. It's my wisdom as a former head of an MBA outcome, distilled, recorded, and now made available to you. But that access is not all you get, because having the teachings, having the fundamentals of the MBA application process is only half the battle. There's always the question, but how does this apply to me? So what I do is I work with candidates as a group every single week through live sessions. Some of them are live Q&As, some of them are resume and essay writing workshops, and some of them are interview mocks. So it's a live interactive MBA admissions group coaching program where I show up for you every single week, and there are discussion groups that are open every single day, and I personally guide you through the MBA application process. It's truly the only program out there that is created by a former dean of MBA admissions, and that is delivered in a low cost but very high touch format. It's really the cure to the dreaded, I wish I had found you earlier, regret that so many MBA candidates express to me when they come to me on Christmas Eve with the deadlines right after the new year looming in the rearview mirror. So I'm going to put a link, because you're not going to find the link to enroll anyone on my website. I only open the doors very rarely, and this month it's one of those months. So I just put it in the chat. And then I'm going to show you one last thing. Last year, Poets and Quants featured that group admissions coaching service in an article because John Byrne got wind of it, and he wanted to showcase this approach, which he called a rare low-cost coaching model. And there's a story connected to this one, and it's about the person whose quote you saw, who got into Harvard and Wharton. That's how he first came to me. That's how his journey started. In August of last year, he read this article about the group admissions coaching program I run. And he joined and he learned the MBA application fundamentals. And he eventually chose to work with me even more closely. I'll have to say this. But if you're here with me today, you can start learning about the MBA admissions process from me literally in the next hour. The next MBA ABC live session is tomorrow at 11 o'clock Eastern, and you can be in it making progress towards your round 2 application. So you can give yourself the tools and access to MBA admission that the most resourced of MBA candidates have. All righty. I know I promised you to leave time at the end for you to ask questions, and that time has come. So the chat and the Q&A should both be open. Tell me, what is on your mind? What is still keeping you up at night as an MBA candidate? I am going to put the link to the program in here. Bear with me for a second. I realized that I should have chosen everyone. There you go. I just put it. Earlier, I had said I had sent it only to hosts and panelists, a common mistake people do on Zoom calls. As one of my professors back when I was just an MBA student used to say, no MBA presentation is complete without technical difficulties. But friends, we have a few minutes, not a lot, but we have a few minutes for you to ask question. How do you know if you're good enough? Oh, that's a big question, Aaron. What makes you think you might not be? What makes you think that you might not be? I am ready to bet that every one of you who's on this call with me today, you stayed with me for nearly 40 minutes now, because I've been monitoring the number. You stayed and you listened, and I'm sure that you took part of other sessions, right? So you're not complacent. I doubt that you're mediocre. So I think you should start from a place of not thinking, how do I know if I'm good enough? Start from a place where you're thinking, how do I show my essence? How do I capture the essence of who I am as a person, who I am as a professional, who I am as a friend, peer, colleague? How do I capture all of this? And how do I then distill that essence and convey it in my application material? So I don't think that you need to start with the notion of you might not be good enough. How to be featured in MBA Spotlight? Ooh, how to be featured? Well, come and be someone in MBA ABC. Application Boost Camp is a mouthful, so we call it MBA ABC. And chances are you might just increase your odds of becoming one. All right, someone else is saying how to show research about schools in essays, how to incorporate conversations with alums in essays. Excellent, excellent, excellent question. I love that you're asking this question. Here's the thing. First of all, you have to do the research, right? And then second of all, you have to figure out what little pieces and bits that you're going to be conveying are relevant to your goals. Most typically, that research in essays is going to show up in 2 types of essays. It's probably going to show up in a classic career goals essay, like Wharton has a classic career goals essay, CBS has a classic career goals essay. This is, and a whole bunch of other schools. So this is where, when you're talking about resources that are relevant to your career, you can talk about how you've learned about these resources or the impact of these resources from someone you spoke with. So this is how you do it. It's a very simple one-liner generally, where you mention something that's relevant. Like, you're not doing it just to name drop, you're doing it to support a point you are making. Now, here's one thing I'm going to say. There will be some schools where it's probably not going to get you a lot of ROI and a lot of mileage. So be very careful about what essays are appropriate for something like this, okay? All righty. So let's see, what else do you guys want to know? Some schools offer a one-on-one consultation or meeting with an admissions officer. How would you approach those? Do you do a blitz through your resume? Here's the thing. Obviously, the format is going to vary. It's a very good thing to have an elevator pitch. I wouldn't necessarily do, I don't know what you mean when you say a blitz through your resume, but it's making me worry that it might be something too heavy-handed where you speak for 5 minutes. That might be too much. I generally tell people to have a 1-minute elevator pitch. You've heard of elevator pitches, right? Where you're giving them just the very high level overview of who you are. And then ideally, you end on a fact about yourself, which typically relates to why you need an MBA, that kind of opens up to questions that you want to be asked, right? So whatever the strongest part of your candidacy is, whatever the strongest part of your background is, talk about that. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I was doing interview prep because for round one candidates, it's interview prep season. I was doing interview prep with someone who really has a very, very strong background in family business. So his elevator pitch ends on how involved he's been in the family business, some very interesting facts about it. And it's like absolutely impossible for the person who's listening to that pitch to not ask questions about the family business, which is exactly what the candidate wants to be asked, right? So 1 minute, I'd say. And then the other thing that you want to do is think very carefully, but without overthinking, what questions you may want to ask of this person. Typically, the two biggest mistakes that happen in these sessions or in any session with MBA admissions team members is either people ask super basic questions. Like I can tell you in my 15 years of working in MBA admission, not one panel that I've been on or have moderated with all the schools, not one panel goes by without someone raising their hand and saying, what's your average GMAT? I mean, come on. So you don't want to be that person. And I doubt that you will be. But also don't go in the other direction and trying to come up with some super obscure question that no one has asked before, because that's not how you're going to differentiate yourself. You don't want to put a person on the spot where they're thinking like, how the heck do I even know the answer? Ask something that's really important to you. Ask something that's something you truly want to know. Ask them something that relates to how they've seen others with similar background like you be successful. So think very carefully about what you're going to ask and listen. Really listen. I was having another conversation yesterday with a candidate. I can't even remember what it was about, but I remember telling them that in some of these conversations, it's important to be a little bit more of a receiver than a transmitter. I have a background in engineering, if you can believe it. So I use engineering analogies sometimes. So don't necessarily go to that interaction thinking that you're absolutely going to stand out and you're going to knock it out of the park. Go with a sincere desire to learn and share a little bit about yourself. Does this help? All right, friends, we have time for maybe 2 more questions. So I'll stay for another minute or two. Tell me, what else can I answer for you? And then I'm going to put that link for you in here one more time, because like I said, you can start learning the MBA admissions fundamentals tonight, and you can be live again with me tomorrow in a much more hands-on session. But what else can I answer for you in our remaining 1 minute? All right, it looks like we don't have any questions. So with this, I'm going to bid you goodbye. It was absolutely wonderful to speak with you today. And I am certain that every single one of you has a great MBA story to share. So I'm rooting for you.